On May 7, 2025, in the morning hours, India launched a series of attacks targeting Pakistan. The Indian military, as a part of an operation codenamed Operation Sindoor, attacked 9 targets in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir, including locations in Bahawalpur, Muridke, Muzaffarabad, Kotli and Sialkot. These places were identified as bases of terrorist organizations such as Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Hizbul Mujahideen. The operation, lasting about 23 minutes, involved the use of MiG-29, Su-30 and Rafale aircraft equipped with Scalp missiles and AASM Hammer bombs. Pakistan reported that at least 26 civilians, including women and children, were killed in the attack, and 46 people were injured. Additionally, Islamabad announced that it shot down 5 Indian aircraft and took several Indian soldiers prisoner, although India has not confirmed these reports. India's attack was a direct response to the terrorist attack on April 22 in Pahalgam, located in Indian-administered Kashmir, which resulted in the deaths of 27 civilians, mainly Hindu tourists. An organization called the Resistance Front, a group linked to Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba, claimed responsibility for carrying out the attack. India accused Pakistan of supporting the attackers, although Pakistan denied any involvement. As a result, India suspended the implementation of the Indus Waters Treaty, an absolutely critical document from Pakistan's point of view. Islamabad describes the attempt to stop or redirect the flow of water belonging to Pakistan as an, quote, act of war. What do we know about the entire operation? What are the main causes of hostility between these two nuclear states? Welcome to the special report. Let's begin with putting the facts in order. On April 22nd, 5 armed militants attacked tourists in the Baizaran Valley near Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir, killing at least 27 people, including 25 Hindu tourists, 1 Christian tourist and a local Muslim guide. The assailants, dressed in military uniforms and armed with M4 and AK-47 rifles, deliberately targeted non-Muslims, asking victims to recite Islamic verses to identify their religion before shooting them. The Resistance Front, affiliated with the Pakistan-based organization Lashkar-e-Taiba, initially claimed responsibility but later retracted this statement. Delhi immediately promised retaliation. This retaliation began with painful diplomatic actions, as the very next day, on April 23rd, India unilaterally suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a vital development to which we shall return shortly. For now, let's adhere to the chronology of recent events. Additionally, India launched a large-scale security operation in Jammu and Kashmir, detaining over 1,500 people in search of the perpetrators. The following day, on April 24th, Islamabad responded with its own restrictions, closing Pakistani airspace to Indian carriers and suspending trade with India. However, these were largely symbolic measures. India and Pakistan have maintained minimal trade relations for several years now. Furthermore, Indian and Pakistani armed forces exchanged small arms fire across the Kashmir border for several subsequent days, undermining the fragile ceasefire agreement reached between the neighbors in 2021. That same day, an Indian soldier was killed, and protests spread across Muslim-dominated regions of Kashmir, condemning terrorism. In the following days, tensions only escalated, with Islamabad anticipating imminent retaliation from Delhi, which, according to Pakistan's Interior Minister, on April 30th, was expected within the next 36 hours. He was mistaken, but only slightly. In the early morning hours at 1:44 a.m. on May 7th, the Indian armed forces conducted 24 precision missile strikes on 9 targets, which, according to Delhi, were terrorist facilities in Pakistan and Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, that India claimed were strongholds of the terrorist groups Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. According to the Indian Army briefing, these were Camp Savai Nala in Muzaffarabad, located 30 kilometers inside Pakistan, which was allegedly a key training center for Lashkar-e-Taiba. Camp Syedna Bilal in Pakistani Kashmir was reportedly a concentration area for Jaish-e-Mohammed. Additionally, Camp Gulbur in Kotli, Camp Barnala in Bimber, Kotli Abbas, Camp Saryal and Mehmona Joya in Sialkot, Markaz Taiba in Muridke, and Markaz Subhan Allah in Bahawalpur, which was allegedly the main headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed. Operation Sindoor, meaning vermilion, red powder used by married women in Hinduism, was a joint undertaking by the Indian Army, Navy and Airspace, representing the first such coordinated action since the 1971 war. It employed precision-guided munitions, including Scalp missiles and AASM Hammer bombs, launched from Rafale fighter jets. Shortly after the attack, Delhi claimed to have killed 70 terrorists and wounded 60. Islamabad confirmed 26 civilian deaths and 46 wounded, and further reported downing 5 Indian aircraft, 1 MiG-29, 1 Su-30 and 3 French Rafales, of which the Indian military possesses only 36 pieces, though it recently ordered an additional 26 units. All downed fighter jets were allegedly in Pakistani airspace. To intercept these aircraft, Pakistan most likely employed the HQ-9 complex, purchased from China. This system is based on the Russian S-300. In the aerial domain, the most significant asset of the Pakistani Air Force is the Chinese J-10 fighters, which Pakistan has possessed since 2022. Following the strikes, Pakistan conducted artillery fire along the line of control, resulting in additional civilian casualties on both sides. Our actions have been focused, measured and non-escalatory in nature. No Pakistani military facilities have been targeted. India has demonstrated considerable restraint in selection of targets and method of execution, stated the Indian Ministry of Defense. However, Pakistan's Prime Minister announced that the quote, resolute response will come at a time and place of our choosing. Unquote. Pakistan's foreign ministry asserted that Indian air forces violated Pakistan's sovereignty by using long-range weapons. The clashes triggered a chain of international reactions. US President Donald Trump called the fighting a disgrace. Quote, we just heard about it. They have been fighting for decades, centuries really. Hopefully it ends quickly. Unquote. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with national security advisors from both countries, urging, quote, both sides to maintain open lines of communication and avoid escalation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on both countries to exercise maximum military restraint, while China, which borders both India and Pakistan, expressed regret and opposition to, quote, all acts of terrorism. Flights over Pakistan have been suspended by virtually all airlines. Today's tensions are of course another chapter in the decades-long friction between neighbors, which has manifested numerous times over the past 70 years. Notable conflicts include the First Kashmir War of 1947, the Second Kashmir War in 1965, the Bangladesh War of 1971, and the Kargil War of 1999. More on this can be found in our material discussing the motives behind this unending hostility. Regarding contemporary acts of violence, it is essential to recall the Uri and Pulwama attacks of 2016 and 2019. Both present substantial similarities to the current escalation. In 2016, India's response followed the attacks in Uri, and similarly in 2019 after bombing near Pulwama. In both instances, India reportedly targeted terrorist camps within Pakistani territory. Pakistan responded with a single bombing operation that notably avoided casualties. Therefore, according to Krzysztof Iwanek, a South Asia expert specializing in India, there is considerable probability that the pattern will repeat itself in the current situation. Quote, India will not attempt to occupy any part of the disputed Kashmir. It would be too risky and costly. The objective is to counter terrorism, and everything India has done recently was aimed at that. Since Pakistan continues to support terrorist groups operating in India, and since efforts to prevent the infiltration of these terrorists have been unsuccessful, India's current government has adopted, since 2016, a strategy of retaliation against Pakistan to compel it to restrain its terrorists. That is India's objective, writes Iwanek. The Indian military statement, referenced earlier, also appears calculated to de-escalate. Neither side is interested in a potentially bloody and costly conflict in Kashmir. However, each is compelled to respond to the actions of its regional rival. That said, further escalation cannot be entirely ruled out, particularly considering that both parties continue to take decisive measures, the most significant being India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty. What does this entail? The Indus Waters Treaty, signed in 1960 after 9 years of negotiations, is a crucial water-sharing agreement between India and Pakistan, negotiated with the participation of the World Bank. It regulates the utilization of the Indus River system, which is essential for agriculture, drinking water and hydroelectric power in both countries. The treaty divides the 6 rivers of the Indus Basin between the two nations. The eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas and Sutlej, are allocated to India for exclusive use. The western rivers, Indus, Jhelum and Chenab, are designed for Pakistan's exclusive use, with the provision that India has access to limited use that does not disrupt water flow, such as creating water reservoirs. This agreement was designed to ensure equitable water distribution, and notably had been respected even during periods of conflict. Ongoing oversight of treaty implementation is maintained by the Indus Commission, which operates even under conditions of war between India and Pakistan, and has the right to inspect infrastructure in both states. One might ask, why is this treaty necessary? All these rivers are tributaries of the Indus, which predominantly flows exclusively through Pakistan. However, a glance at the map reveals that India controls all tributaries, as well as the Indus, in their upper parts, meaning that interference at higher elevations would affect their levels downstream. This situation is analogous to the Egypt-Ethiopia dispute regarding the dam on the Nile. For Pakistan, the treaty is of existential significance, as it is an agrarian country with 80% of its cultivated land dependent on the Indus River system. On a daily basis, 237 million Pakistanis rely on it, including major cities such as Karachi, Lahore, and Multan. The river is directly responsible for 25% of Pakistan's GDP and provides 37% of its employment. From a strategic perspective, this action therefore has considerably deeper implications than the May 7 attack. That's why Islamabad has characterized, quote, any attempt to stop or divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan as an act of war, unquote. Pakistan is preparing international legal actions in response to India's suspension of the treaty, considering at least 3 different legal options, including raising the issue with the World Bank, the Permanent Court of Arbitration, or the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Meanwhile, Delhi suspended the treaty not only due to the recent acts of violence in Kashmir, but did so because it considers the treaty unfair to India. Quote, "The Jhelum, Chenab and Indus, rivers Pakistan is entitled to use, have much more water than the Ravi, Sutlej and Beas, which India controls. In effect, India has access to about 20% of the total water covered by the treaty, while Pakistan has access to the remaining 80%, asserts Anuttama Banerjee, former staff member at the Washington-based Stimson Center. India feels that the treaty does not take into account newer threats and concerns such as population stress and climate change," the analyst adds. On the other hand, the treaty's proportional allocation of river shares is by no means coincidental. For Pakistan, the Indus is absolutely indispensable, while for India, this system is significant only for its northern regions, Jammu, Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh. Therefore, if India, driven by a sense of injustice, continues to interfere with the Indus tributaries, tensions will only escalate, and kinetic exchanges could spread to levels comparable to the Kargil War of 1999. In such a scenario, the world would become acquainted with yet another new frontline locations.